So, you all ready for the next step? Yeah, you heard it. There is a next step. Sorry about that, but I'm not the one herding the cats and marching the children of Israel through the desert. That's our beloved, and he is still requiring us to go around the mountain a few times. I'm thinking he has to get just that right color of black and blue on us because that's the color of the bride when she is seen as this butterfly. And I'm really thankful that many of you are seeing this method that God has been using, that it's step by step, and he's not going to give us more information than he wants to at a certain time. And yeah, we get our hopes and expectations all jacked up, raring to go, putting in high gear. Quite often that's where that black and blue comes from. But I greatly appreciate those that are seeing this method that God is using to walk us through the wilderness, to put us through a learning curve, to get us to see what he wants us to see, and to bring separation. What do you mean by that? God's separating the bride from the bridesmaids. He's separating the bride from the wedding party. He's separating the bride from the guests for the wedding banquet. And he's separating the bride from the tares and the mockers. About a month or two back, I heard someone, as if they were standing right behind me, saying, "The separation has begun." And at the time, I had no clue what that meant. I knew where it was coming from, and it was the Lord speaking to me, but it was as if he was standing right behind me, and I heard it audibly, which I didn't. I heard it in my spirit, heard it in my mind, but it was loud and clear and precise. The separation has begun. And this walk that he has us stepping through, step by step, is doing exactly that. It's separating those who are pursuing him because they love him, as opposed to those who are not looking for that deeper and intimate relationship with the Lord. I mean, stop and think about it. A bridesmaid. What type of relationship is there between a bridesmaid and someone else's bridegroom? Well, it's basically a relationship based on their acquaintance or some type of semi-deep relationship, like a casual friendship or something like that. And these bridesmaids and the bridal party for a Hebrew wedding is usually made up of brothers and sisters and cousins, some type of blood relationship, some type of covenantal relationship. But it's not a deep, intimate marriage relationship. That's between the groom and the bride. And we've been seeing through all these videos the black and blue butterfly. That's what's leading this parade, this procession. And I can't think of any better means to bring separation than to run all the participants through a gauntlet of disappointments, mockings, failures, bullying. I tell you what, that's going to test your mettle. That's going to test your relationship with the Lord. So yeah, I think that's what the Lord was speaking to me back then, was the separation has begun. And we are in that process. And we're getting black and blue. And it's not a cruel thing on God's part. I mean, do you remember Gideon? There was a separation process. The numbers were whittled down to 300. So think it not strange that we're going through a difficult process. It's the bride that makes herself ready. The guests at the wedding don't make themselves ready. Neither do the bridesmaids. It's just the bride. And I think that making process is and was meant to be quite intense. So what we're looking at here is the next step. And just like in the other videos, I'll walk you through this and you can see how this all unfolded. And you can see all the next breadcrumbs that God has put on our path. Simply just some incredible information and multiple confirmations that appear to be connecting all these former dreams and visions with these current ones, and utilizing all the things we have learned that God has walked us through these last couple months, especially these last couple weeks. And real quick, look at Job 38:32. This is when God was speaking to Job about, Orion and the Pleiades and all the things we've been talking about. And he says, "Can you bring forth the Mazzaroth in its season?" And that's what's been happening in the last month or two. The Mazzaroth are all the constellations, not just the zodiac, but the constellations and all those incredible signs in the heavens like nebulas and star clusters. And when did God bring them forth? Because I'm not seeing it back in history. I just see people dabbling with the zodiac. This is God revealing his story in the heavens through the eyes of Stellarium. And we're seeing, as it were, Christ as Arcturus, Christ as Leo, which he was always associated with prior, as well as Christ as Jupiter, Christ as the sun holding up the bride, the moon, Christ as Pisces, the fish. I mean, there's a Christian symbol for you. Christ as the ram, Christ as Sagittarius. Look what we found when you looked at Orion being a type of Christ. Christ is Orion. And here we have Virgo, which could easily represent the bride, and the moon representing the bride. The stories in the heavens is not the zodiac. The stories in the heaven is Yahshua HaMashiach. And it's just now being expressed by the Spirit of God through Stellarium. That's what you've been watching through all these butterfly videos. So let's get started here, and I'm going to walk you through this next step and how all this information came to light, largely through Team Jesus and team members sending stuff in and having communication with each other and myself via the comment section and email. And this stuff is just coming at us at warp speed. It's incredible. So what's the next step? Well, we need to look at the last few steps. It started with the things coming from what we have learned before. And I've got no one but Olive Branch to blame. I'm blaming you, Olive Branch, because they sent me a conundrum. They sent me a puzzle. They sent me a multiple moon dream that her husband had. And he wasn't even going to post it. But there it was. It fell right into my lap because now I have to go figure it out. Curiosity killed the cat.
Again, the moons moved down. They moved to the left, they moved up, and then they moved to the right, and then he pointed up and said, "It's the rapture."
And I took this thing and I rolled it around for a couple hours, came at it from a couple different angles. Nothing was happening. And what motivated me the most is that the first possible rendering of what it meant would push the rapture or rapture events into next year. And I went, well, that meant everything that we've been dealing with, it's all false because everything was pointing to this year, 2022. How am I going to explain that if this is truly from God and if it's truly talking about next year? I can't wait to next year. And that's a bad thing because it motivates me in the wrong direction. I should be relaxing and waiting on the leading of the Lord and walking the steps he has me step. And not thinking that this is going to happen next year or 10 years from now. I had one come up. Lady said, oh, it's not going to happen for another 60 years. Anyway, here I have this dream from her husband. And please go listen to the two videos that Olive Branch put out. The very first one, and then the response after we started dialing this stuff up and started to find out what it meant. You need to hear both videos as narrated by them. And I'll put the links in the description box for this particular video posting. And I'm chomping at this. I'm working it, trying to connect it to other dreams and stuff like that. Just total failure all the way around. So I went, I'm going to bed. Forget this. I don't want to be doing this stuff anyway. Got up the next morning. Here comes the download from the Lord. Stuff just starts pouring into my head. And it usually comes as questions. Things I need to solve so it makes sense. I'm just down this rabbit hole being bugged to no end to figure this out. So what have we been working with the last couple videos? Well, it's that Fibonacci golden ratio curly Q pattern that when we place it on certain locations that God showed people to look at on Stellarium, it produced specific dates. One, it went right through the last day of Tabernacles. One went through November 21st. Well, is there any other place we can place these on and see where this curly Q line runs through someplace down the timeline to a future location where the moon is going to be zooming by? Maybe there's some significance there. Fibonacci curve, the golden ratio pointing to the throne of God, Polaris. And other people have come out and said, have you attempted to place it someplace else on the ecliptic to see if it produces something? And in this dream that Olive Branch's husband saw on Thanksgiving, November 24th, this thing was doing a dance. Two moons dancing around each other, down to another location, then to the left, then to the... It formed a box. This dance, as it's doing this dance, it forms a box. And I thought, if God meant it to be a sequential timeline of one moon to the next moon phase, to the next moon phase, month to the next month, to the next month, to the next month, it would have been a straight line of moons. This thing was in a box. And to the moons, there was a bright moon and there was a dark moon. And the bright moon was dancing around the dark moon as they danced in this box. Well, here's a novel thought. Is there such thing as a Fibonacci box and a Fibonacci dance? All part of the learning curve. We're going to learn about Fibonacci, the finger of God, the fingerprint of God. Well, how about a Google image of Fibonacci box, followed by Fibonacci dance? Guess what? They're both the same thing. So what does that equate to? God's still pushing the Fibonacci pattern. He's still pointing at things. Kind of felt he wanted me to go right back to Stellarium, find a spot, a very peculiar spot, and plaster that Fibonacci curlicue pattern on it and see where it comes out. Well, where do I place that? Well, how about Thanksgiving, November 24th, when God delivered this dream? And this is what it produced. It produced November 30th. That's where the moon is going to be at the end of this countdown Fibonacci pattern. November 30th on the ecliptic, obviously, that's the moon's orbit, on the left hip of Aquarius. But that means absolutely nothing unless this curlicue is cutting through something as its pattern progresses to its end. And if you look closely at the upper area of the curve, it goes through the Eagle constellation, Aquila, and the Dolphin constellation, Dolphinus. And these are the two constellations that Roche saw many weeks ago and thought that what she saw was happening right then when she saw it. And she kept saying, God is giving all this emphasis to this area.
He is putting us in this area, you guys. What we're doing here, you guys, I don't know. We're going to find out here pretty soon.
Well, I'm looking at how she's explaining it, and there's no emphasis at all that I can make out. So I just kind of shelved it, just kind of put it in the background for a while and waited to see what would happen. Well, it's happening. It's happening now. The eagle over that dolphin, and that dolphin is Job's coffin. You can look it up. Look up Job's coffin constellation. It's the dolphin. And I've got my Fibonacci curlicue pattern going right through both of them. At the same time, coming down to the knee of Aquarius, and I'll show you the significance of that in a little bit, plotting through the moon on November 30th. And this is where the plot thickens. That square box of dancing anything, in this case moons spiraling around each other, which I believe is the Fibonacci curve, and there's 4 of them. 4 boxes with 4 Fibonacci is the dance square, and it's called the Eye of God.
If you connect the successive points where these whirling squares divide the sides in golden ratios, you obtain a logarithmic spiral that coils inward toward the pole, the point by the intersection of the diagonals, which was called fancifully the Eye of God.
Oh, where have I heard that term before? The Eye of God. I knew right off the bat what it was. It's the Helix nebula. Go Google it. I'm not making this stuff up. The Helix nebula is the nebula that almost everybody identifies as the Eye of God. Wow, I wonder if I went to Stellarium and I dialed in the Helix nebula to find its location. I wonder where it's going to end up. Give you one guess. Yeah, right below the moon on November 30th, and the Fibonacci curlicue is going right through it. And this is where we apply the law of coincidence. So now we don't have just the fingerprint or finger of God doing its thing. We also have the Eye of God in the equation. And we have a possible fulfillment of a prophecy from our bridegroom, our Lord Yahshua HaMashiach, Jesus our Christ, where he said the sign of his return would be this brilliant illumination, this brilliant illumination, this brilliant flash in the heavens. A flash that is going to span from one end of heaven to the other, traveling from east to west. That can only be a supernova. And that is possibly what other people have seen in dreams, especially Roche, where they see this big red ball of fire exploding. And in those passages that Jesus prophesied, and that's Luke 7:37 and Matthew 24:28, he makes this weird comment, and I cover it in some of my past videos, and that is, where the corpse is, there the eagle shall gather. So what does that mean? Where the corpse is, the eagle shall gather. Well, last time I checked, you put a corpse in a coffin, Job's coffin. And here we have an eagle hovering over this coffin, and guess where the Fibonacci curlicue goes through? Goes through the eagle, down through Job's coffin, the dolphin, down from there, cutting through the moon, right through the eye of God. And I kept thinking, why Aquarius? What does Aquarius have anything to do with this? Obviously, it's a major player in this equation. Then I get a posting from one of the team players on Team Jesus. This person's going through the exact same thing, the exact same questions. And the question came up was, I'm looking at what Roche had with her crescent moons, and I see the mirror thing going on. I see the reflection. Could that crescent moon be a mirror image and be farther down the timeline, specifically November 30th? And then I remembered Olive Branch once again. Her original dream that got her thick into this mess was about 3 moons. And here, I'll put it up on the screen for you. She saw this, and she saw that pink cloud slowly going across the heavens. And we are dealing with some pink nebulas, but nobody can see that. I think a better representation of that is that exploding red ball of fire that these dreamers, including Roche, are thinking. I think that's going to be the final manifestation of that. Possibly Betelgeuse, which we've been watching now for many months. Well, this Team Jesus member is saying November 30th. That would be the mirror image when it goes into crescent. And that's what I came up with a half hour before that was posted. I went, there's a confirmation, I think. Yeah, that's a confirmation. I don't know what else it would be. And the statement was made, I think that the smiling man in the moon of Olive Branch's original dream is Aquarius and not Orion, which we originally thought. And I went, oh no, here we go again. Double emphasis, double application. When I first saw that 3 moon thingy, I thought the same moon phase. You first see the butterfly, then the smiling face of a man, then you see the owl. And that's the only thing I thought. And now I'm thinking, that's not what it was. But that is what it was. That's how God wanted us to see it at that time, because by doing it that way, it exposed all these players. It got us to point A, so now we can get to point B. And you can't get to point B if you don't get to point A first. So how the Lord had me understand it at that time, and it was just kind of a godly deception as God does, because he wants us to see all these counting points. And what happened right after that original understanding, that was not quite the complete understanding. It was the first rendering, the first application of this dream. What came right after that? That's when we got the Fibonacci curve from James, and we started applying it. And we found all these players. We found Polaris. We found the Owl Nebula. We found Arcturus and the Bear constellation. We found the involvement of Leo when the moon came across and was petting its mane. We found Argos, the ship that people have been seeing for years, the ship they sail away with Jesus. We found the megalithic galaxy cloud. We found that other nebula in the chambers of the south, in that a fly constellation, Musca. We found all that stuff. If we had not run through this by seeing these 3 moons the way we originally did, we would have missed a lot of that. We probably would have missed all of it. But by doing it that way, we had 2 renderings of the Fibonacci curve giving us that golden pathway, the pathway which Argos is going to carry away the bride of Christ with Christ through the Magellan Strait, as it were, on the golden path up to the throne of God, Polaris. We found all that through our understanding, our original understanding of the 3 moons. But that's not what the moons stand for, because it's 3 moons. If it was 1 moon phase, you would have 1 moon with those 3 images placed in the center of the moon. No, we have 3 moons. Each have their own moon. And the middle moon has to be Aquarius, because that's the only man's face on Stellarium that's smiling. Orion isn't smiling. He's got this kind of a cement-looking face on, no smile, but Aquarius on Stellarium's got a big smile on his face as he's dumping out this water in the Pig constellation washing station, where the moon gets cleansed, gets mikvahed, with a huge dose of fresh water coming out of the vase that Aquarius is carrying. And it took the investigation just a little deeper, and it looked at every constellation that has a man's face on it. That would include the centaurs. There is one statue on a pedestal with a bust of a face of a man. You have Sagittarius, You have Hercules. Well, there's about a dozen of them. And only one of those faces on Stellarium had a smiling face. Guess which one? Again, let's dial that into the law of coincidences. And now the moon on November 30th is right back at that exact location, maybe ready for one last mikvah. And that's why I believe that in this last rendering of placing the Fibonacci curly Q golden ratio gate street pathway, placing it right on where the moon is, that's why it cuts through Aquarius, along with the other constellations and the Eye of God that I mentioned. And that's because it points back to those three moons that Olive Branch saw, and the middle moon is the man with the smiling face, Aquarius. It matches perfectly. Second application, and the second application is usually the better one, but we needed both. And I've been telling people, you heard me say it on the past videos, God will bring this stuff, he'll bring a vision, he'll bring an understanding, and then there's a better one later on, double application. I'm to the point where I expect it now. That's just what I've been running into these last 12 months going through this stuff. That's part of the learning curve. And boy, do we have a better application of it. But I'll say again, we needed the first application to unfold all this stuff, to reveal all this stuff, so we can get to the second application, which is the better application, which is what you're looking at. Now, what could that mean as far as things happening on November 30th? Well, possibly something bride-related, because it looks like she's about ready to go into another mikvah on her way to a second go-around with all that drama with Argos setting sail up this long curve on its way to the throne of God. And in the process of this, from November 30th to that day, the moon goes through the Golden Gate again. So maybe the Golden Gate that Roche saw is this second passing through. It's the second attempt. And all this stuff we saw through Tabernacles and the 7 days after Tabernacles, that was just a forerunner. It just showed us everything that's going to happen, but we needed to see what was going to happen, or what could happen. Because if you remember, that third moon of Olive Branch's dream was the owl. Remember, it went butterfly, smiling man, owl. Well, how can we be confident that November 30th is something bride related? Well, what have we been dealing with these last many months? The blue butterfly. Is that somewhere in this equation? Well, then I was reminded to a couple of other prophetic dreams, one talking about Sagittarius, or we thought it was Sagittarius, that came from Sara's star child, of this figure pointing south and to the east. Something about an arrow, and what she received in her dream was something Sagitta, Sagitta. And I thought, well, I know where that's at. That's Sagittarius. It's pointing kind of southward towards the east. Yeah, and oh, by the way, that moon is right over the tip of the arrow on Thanksgiving. Also happens to be the first day of the 8th Hebrew month of this year. And these are kind of the things God is into. You know, signs and wonders in the heavens, the moon and moon phases, defining these signs and wonders and events associated with them. And here I had just posted on my community page that there is a blue butterfly constellation. And isn't that in the general area? Well, back to Stellarium. Let's dial in Thanksgiving Day right around sunset, because that will begin that first day of this next Hebrew month. Wow, let's see how close these things line up. So I typed into the search engine of Stellarium the official number that Google gave me for the blue butterfly nebula, NGC 6302. Well, it came up Bug Nebula, and in parentheses, Butterfly Nebula. And that's that nebula that sometimes it's depicted more reddish, but most of them had it as a blue color. And referring back to Sarah's star child, she had a dream about a dragonfly. And in my investigation, well, I looked up Dragonfly Nebula. Guess what it came up as? The nebula you're looking at. That NGC 6302 Bug Nebula, or the Butterfly Nebula. And here it's sitting right under the Thanksgiving moon. So here I'm thinking, Good choice to plot that Fibonacci golden curlicue starting from the Thanksgiving moon, because it's sitting right over the blue butterfly. And the blue butterfly has continually presented itself as the black and blue bride of Christ, waiting to fly away, sail away on that sailing ship Argos, doing that dance. And there's multiple dances going on here, one being the dance of step by step. How's that for a dance? But also believers doing the dance in pursuing their heavenly bridegroom. That's the dance of the Song of Solomon, as they continually pursue him through this step by step. There's your connection to the bride issue for November 30th. And the thought came to me, the apple of God's eye, or a different way of saying it, the apple of the eye of God. That's the bride. That's the black and blue butterfly. That is where this third and hopefully last Fibonacci countdown began. It was driven, so to speak, by that black and blue butterfly nebula. But there's more to this jigsaw puzzle. That comment I received from one of our team players on Team Jesus was talking about the mirror image of the crescent moon that these dreamers have seen, especially Rocher. So I'm looking into that, and yes, that November 30th moon phase is the mirror image. It goes from 49 degrees and grows as it's waning towards the next full moon a week later. But on that day, November 30th, it is still a crescent moon until it reaches that 50% illumination mark, which is later on in the day. And then what I began to think about was what a lot of people are passing around, we will meet in the middle. It's come up on a number of YouTube sites, and Rocher talks about it, and I believe now James has talked about it. And if you've seen James's latest posting, he's again into what God is showing him with the Fibonacci golden ratio, along with some other calculations in mathematics. And he's coming up with November 30th. Well, when he displays it, he shows two crosses. Oh, did that catch my attention? Because I saw two crosses in one of the dreams from Sara Starchild. Two red crosses. Or is it two red swords? Or was it swords crosses? Or maybe it's the same thing. And thinking back to the many dreams I started this with about 12 months ago, we had dreamers talking about this stuff happening because of the brightness of the cross. And Crystal Clay talked about this asteroid or the shooting star heading towards the crescent. And she called it a crescent moon. Now there's a multiple application because we use that to discern this red giant called Betelgeuse that's swooping down and comes into alignment with the celestial ecliptic. And if that baby were to pop, that would certainly fulfill Rocher's dream of an exploding red ball of fire, as well as other dreamers who have seen supernovas. Because scientists think this is going to produce a reddish or a pinkish huge illumination in the sky, kind of on the order of the aurora borealis, but the whole world's going to see it. It'll be shining from pole to pole, moving from east to west, just kind of like what Jesus said about the sign of his return, the season of his return, where in both passages he talks about where the corpse is, the eagles shall gather. You see how this is all lining up? So James has two crosses. Sara Starchild saw two red crosses. And I'm thinking, yeah, and we drew two red crosses or two red swords on Stellarium. Well, actually one, but if you go a month later, which will be at the end of this moon phase, there will be a second. And I'll throw this one up for you. The first we found was on the last day of Tabernacles, November 17th, and the second one will be a month later with that red sword drawn through the same characters or players that we saw on the November 17th. That would be Polaris going down through the Owl Nebula, straight down through Leo and the crescent moon, continuing farther down through about the area of Argos. And this time it doesn't go through the Magellanic Galaxy, it goes through that other nebula in that constellation Musca, the Fly. But it gives us a straight line from Polaris down to that nebula. It gives us a red sword. Two red swords, a month apart, and right in the middle of it is November 30th. And if Olive Branch's 3 moons represent a moon phase, followed by the next month moon phase, followed by the next month moon phase, well, then her owl lines up with that second sword. And that would be an application for one of the 3-2-1 countdowns. A countdown of moon phases, a countdown of months, 3 months. And if this, we will meet in the middle, saying that people have been hearing in the spirit or seeing in dreams or wherever it's coming from, if that is from the Lord and we are to meet in the middle, I can't think of any better middle than between the 2 red swords and between the 3 crescents of those particular moon phases that Olive Branch saw. It'd be the crescent that started all this butterfly stuff, that would be October, the crescent of November, which would be the smiling man, Aquarius, on November 30th, and then finally the crescent where that last moon phase is, as represented by the Owl nebula. It all matches. And not only do these particular dreams match, it goes back to all these dreams that we've been investigating for the last 12 months. Holly 2 moons with the dark moon over the bright moon, well, that could easily be interpolated as the blood moon of November 7th into 8th. And the bridegroom comes at midnight. Well, which midnight? We've dialed it into everything else. How about the last day, the last few hours of that moon phase? And that will end the early hours of December 1st, because we're looking at the International Dateline West as to the waning few seconds of the 30th of November. How's that for a midnight? Fits pretty good, and it would fulfill that prophetic dream if that is how God meant it to be fulfilled. And yes, that is highly doable. And then there is the cracked star vision from the Netherlands back from 2018, where she sees this cracked star becoming light between 2 moons, then 2 suns. Well, that easily lines up with the 2 moons being the blood moon of November 7th through 8th and the following total solar eclipse in the month of April of next year. The cap moons and Gigi's cap 22. Well, both the blood moons of 2022 will present a capping. It's capped in the upper left-hand corner as the blood moon phase begins. Obviously, it wasn't the May 16th blood moon phase, but the November 7th and 8th blood moon phase isn't completed until the full moon of December. So that's still in play. The young lady who saw a full moon with a rainbow crown on the upper left hand, well, that could very well be the crowning of the November 7th through 8th full moon, and she said it was rainbow. Well, that full moon had blue on it, as well as some tinges of some other colors. It was rainbow, and some people described it as such. Also, the rainbow has connection with the covenant of Noah, the rainbow covenant. And how many times have we seen numbers and visions and dreams and comments where people are saying, as in the days of Noah? Well, we're right in the middle of it. And what did she say? She said she knew in her heart that when this happened, the rapture was going to take place. And what did Olive Branch say and show on her video, this last video, when these dancing moons did their dance? And when we combine all these dreams from all these dreamers, from 2 red swords of which we would meet in the middle, if it's plotted on stellarium, or the crescents that we would meet in the middle if they're plotted on stellarium, to the moon phase of this blood moon, to the midnight hour of the last few seconds of November 30th, to the blue butterfly constellation driving all of this, because that's where we place the Fibonacci golden path curlicue that God is pointing at, because the Fibonacci pattern is the finger of God. He's pointing at it, and it goes right through the eye of God, the apple of the eye of God. I mean, all of these dreams, when we come to a more full and complete and better rendering of them, a second, sometimes third or fourth rendering of them, it's looking like November 30th. We meet in the middle where God's pointing, and the apple of God's eye, the apple of the eye of God, might be flying out of here as that blue butterfly bride. And this would also complete and fulfill all these numbers, 1111, 911, 717. I mean, I find this quite remarkable. We can actually connect all of it to that day. Can anyone guarantee that? Well, of course not. But it certainly looks like the next step. Welcome to the dance of the black and blue butterfly. Maranatha.
hills, upon the mountains. To me you have run, my beloved, you've captured my heart. With you I will go, you are my love, you are my fair one. The winter is past and the spring